Now with a summer vacation warning, but is this really a warning? Did you need to be told that this is not a good idea?
It happened Monday in Yellowstone National Park.
Dozens of people are injured by wild animals every year. Despite the warnings to keep your distance, people are getting up close and personal with these animals.
Yellowstone is located at the meeting point of the Great Plains, the Great Basin, and the Columbia Plateau. For more than 10,000 years before Yellowstone's designation as a park, Native American people lived, hunted, fished, gathered plants, quarried obsidian, and used thermal water for religious and medicinal purposes. The first people who lived in Yellowstone throughout history were the land's first conservationists, guarding it for its valuable resources and cultural significance. Today, Yellowstone is one of the world's largest, nearly intact temperate-zone ecosystems, preserving over 10,000 hydrothermal features, more than the rest of the world combined. However, this national treasure is also the location where scientists have made terrifying discoveries that have the potential to completely reshape everything. Stay tuned as we bring you these amazing discoveries. Early in the 19th century, European American trappers returned home from trips west of a place where the earth hissed and bubbled, where multicolored hot springs and spouting geysers dotted the landscape. Until formal expeditions to what is now Yellowstone National Park began in 1869, these reports were largely dismissed as delusions or tall tales. These early expeditions yielded reports of hydrothermal features, massive waterfalls, canyons, and herds of wildlife, which piqued the interest of Washington, D.C.-based American politicians. As a result, Yellowstone was designated as the world's first national park by an act of Congress and signed into law by President Ulysses S. Grant on March 1, 1872. Thomas Moran's artwork and William H. Jackson's photographs are said to have helped persuade Congress that the Yellowstone landscape was worth protecting. Those who advocated to have Yellowstone placed under official protection by Congress believed that this could be done at no cost to the government. When the first unpaid superintendent saw the consequences of not having funds to protect park wildlife and other resources, he quickly disproved this concept. Poachers, vandals, and squatters prowled the newly established park. Congress appropriated funds for protection in 1878, but efforts to protect the park were largely futile until the United States Army took command in 1886. The Yellowstone boundaries we know today are different from the straight, rectangular-shaped boundaries that existed when the park was established. President Hoover signed legislation in 1929 to change the borders to better conform to natural land and water features. 3 years later, Hoover issued an executive order that added approximately 7,000 acres above the original north boundary near Gardner, Montana, to provide ungulate winter range. Yellowstone now covers 3,472 square miles, 8,987 square kilometers, roughly the size of Puerto Rico. Much of the park is located in Wyoming's upper left corner, but it also extends into Idaho and Montana. Yellowstone was named by Native Americans after the yellow sandstone along the Yellowstone River. People commonly believe that Yellowstone got its name from the vivid yellow color schemes seen in the Yellowstone Grand Canyon. However, the park's name is derived from sandstone found along the Yellowstone River in eastern Montana, which is several hundred miles downstream and northeast of the park. There is nothing else on Earth quite like Yellowstone. And there is something that will excite everyone from young children to grandparents, whether they are interested in colorful hot springs, mud pots, or majestic waterfalls. Yellowstone needs to be seen to be believed, and visitors of all ages will find something to get excited about. Yellowstone National Park is located on top of a dormant supervolcano capable of erupting with a magnitude of 8. In certain areas of the park, the distance from magma or molten rock to the surface is only 3 miles. The park also has the most geysers and hot springs of any place on the planet. This truly unique national park has many wonders to offer, including the Yellowstone Grand Canyon and wildlife such as America's largest buffalo herd, grizzly bears, and wolves. Yellowstone National Park contains approximately 50% of the world's hydrothermal features, creating an effect that appears to be on fire. Old Faithful, the most famous of the geysers, is one of the most popular and recognized natural wonders in the United States. While Yellowstone is a sight to behold, there are some terrifying aspects to the national park. In fact, the first one we'll discuss is better imagined than experienced. Even imagining it can make you flinch. The hot springs in Yellowstone are beautiful to look at and even photograph, but what happens when a visitor falls into one of them? Let us first establish that going for a swim in any of the hot springs is a terrible idea. This volcanic caldera sits atop one of the world's largest magma bodies, which is fed by an upwelling plume of superheated material. Because of the dynamic and violent subterranean plumbing, the water bodies at the surface, including the numerous geysers and springs, are highly acidic, extremely hot, and lethal to animal life. Back in 2016, an unfortunate individual decided to disregard the numerous warnings posted throughout the park and dip his finger into one of Yellowstone's numerous hot springs. A bad decision. Not only did he drown, but he also disintegrated within 24 hours. While we can assure you that it was a terrible decision, what happened to his body when he fell into the water? The first thing he noticed was that his body felt like it was bathing in water that was around 93 degrees Celsius, 199 degrees Fahrenheit. It would hurt like nothing you've ever felt, but only for as long as his nervous system could register pain, which fortunately or unfortunately won't be more than a minute or so. The late visitor's skin, the epidermis, quickly broke down and disintegrated at this temperature. His blood vessels within his dermis would rupture shortly after, resulting in rapid blood loss. Instead of breaking down, some underlying skin layers lost all of their water and became leathery and blackened. His underlying subcutaneous fat would soon bubble off as well. All of this occurred in less than a minute and is known as a full-thickness burn. His nervous system went into shock and was irreversibly damaged. At this point, his organs had begun to fail, despite the fact that the extreme heat stress had already shut down some of them. The acidity of the water then completely takes over after death occurs in 2 to 3 minutes. Some of the hot springs have mildly alkaline waters, but many, including the one the visitor fell into at Norris Geyser Basin, are extremely acidic with pH values of around 2. The lower the value, the more acidic it becomes. Even the skeleton is no match for such high acidity levels and high temperatures. Within a few hours, the visitor had faded away, dissolved into nothing. The next discovery at Yellowstone National Park is literally out of this world. Researchers think a strange species of microorganisms discovered living inside rocks in an unfriendly geothermal climate and in Wyoming's Yellowstone National Park could reveal exciting new clues about ancient life on Earth and help lead the hunt for signs of life on Mars. Jeffrey Walker, John Spear, and Norman Pace of the University of Colorado Boulder, CU Boulder, published their findings in a study financed by the National Science Foundation's Division of Environmental Biology and NASA. The microorganisms were found in the pores of rocks in a very acidic environment with high amounts of metals and silicates at around 95 degrees Fahrenheit in Yellowstone's Norris Geyser Basin, according to the CU Boulder study team. The new study demonstrates that microbial communities are prone to fossilization and have the potential to be preserved in the geologic record. Scientists believe similar geothermal settings once existed on Mars, where astrobiologists have recently increased their quest for past and current life forms. This is the first description of these microbial communities, which may be a good predictor of previous life on Mars due to their ability to preserve fossils. Because of the abundance of this type of microbial life in Yellowstone, Martian rocks connected with old hydrothermal systems may be the greatest bet for discovering signs of past life there. Norris Geyser Basin, located about 20 miles north of Yellowstone Lake, is regarded the hottest and most active geyser basin in Yellowstone, if not the globe. The researchers found that the pores in the rocks where these organisms reside had a pH value of 1, which is acidic enough to dissolve nails. It's yet another instance of how life may thrive in an environment that most humans regard as hostile. Did you know that despite its size, Yellowstone Park's environment is shrinking? What does this imply for the much-loved national park? Yellowstone's limits haven't changed much, despite President Herbert Hoover's minor revisions. What is truly changing is the amount of wild natural habitat accessible in the overall Yellowstone ecosystem, which is 10 times the size of the park itself. It has been diminishing at an alarming rate, posing a dilemma for the various creatures that routinely cross park boundaries. According to research published by Montana State University ecologists Andrew Hansen and Linda Phillips, the ecosystem's human population has doubled and building density has tripled since 1970. Both are anticipated to quadruple again by 2050, generating even greater environmental problems. It is unfortunate that human development now encompasses an estimated 31% of the greater Yellowstone environment. As Hansen described it, rural dwellings border the park on all sides. Looking at a map of all the residences that now surround the park is rather astonishing to me, and changes in these private lands around the park have a significant impact on what happens in the park. Many animals, such as elk, bison, and pronghorn, spend the summer in the park, but migrate south in the winter, where they increasingly find themselves on established private property where they aren't necessarily welcome and are often killed down. Other ranging animals, such as grizzlies, face problems as a result of human interaction. Their population declines as they are killed on roads, for example. Roads are particularly problematic since they are harmful and restrict animals from moving from one section of the ecosystem to another in order to survive. Yellowstone is also dealing with exotic species pushing on its borders, such as unwanted grasses and plants spread by horse and animal grazing. Recently, non-native species such as the eastern smallmouth bass, which poses a major danger to the park's famous trout populations, have been caught just beyond the confines of the park. This poses a problem because the eastern smallmouth bass is invasive. The enormous number of visitors to Yellowstone is also having an impact. More than 4 million people visit the park each year, affecting animal feed trails, resting areas, and even mating. Yellowstone has actually brought back an animal, the bison, due to scientists. When the park was founded, there were no longer any bison herds on the continent, since the animals had been hunted to the point where there was a significant decrease in their population. Their foraging range had also diminished as a result of the extended dry years, and by the 1880s there were only approximately 20 bison left in the park. However, there are as many as 5,500 bison living in Yellowstone National Park now, and they are doing rather well. In fact, numerous Native American tribes and the state of Montana subsidize limited bison hunts near the border to regulate numbers. Park rangers also use traps to catch bison at the park's northern boundary and then either send some of them to be slaughtered or move the others to new places to populate them. The presence of bison is beneficial to Yellowstone in several ways. As they graze and excrete, they feed a cycle of nutrient-rich soils and plants. When bison graze on the tops of the grasses, they promote new plant growth, resulting in more of the productive foods on which bison and other herbivores rely. In this way, bison shape the Yellowstone ecology. Yellowstone National Park is home to some of the most visually stunning geysers and hot springs on the planet, but hidden beneath them is one of the most dangerous volcanoes in the world. The massive Yellowstone hotspot, commonly known as the Yellowstone supervolcano, has erupted at least 10 times in the last 16 million years, irrevocably altering North America's topography. Its impacts, however, were not limited to North America, as it occasionally bent the Earth's climate, sending flakes of flying ash to every corner of the globe. According to the scientists, the new discovery rewrites the past history of the hotspots. The most powerful and apocalyptic of these eruptions are known as supereruptions. These earth-shaking blasts have a VEI of 8 or higher, which evaluates a volcano's relative explosivity by the height of its ash column and the volume of its remaining lava. In comparison, Mount St. Helens' 1980 eruption scored a 5 on the VEI scale. However, due to the logarithmic scale, a level 8 supereruption is approximately 1,000 times more explosive than that. The second massive eruption, known as the Gray's Landing supereruption, happened 8.72 million years ago. This eruption encompassed over 8,900 square miles, 23,000 square kilometers, of what is now southern Idaho and northern Nevada, making it the greatest single Yellowstone hotspot eruption yet identified. However, a recent NASA study reveals something unexpected about Yellowstone. Following the publication of a supervolcano article last month, a group of NASA researchers released a previously unreleased report about the hazard and what could be done about it. I was a member of NASA's Advisory Council on Planetary Defense, which study ways for NASA to defend the planet from asteroids and comets, explains Brian Wilcox of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, at the California Institute of Technology. During that study, I came to the conclusion that the supervolcano threat is substantially greater than the asteroid or comet threat. On Earth, there are approximately 20 supervolcanoes that are known to exist, and on average, large eruptions take place once every 100,000 years. A prolonged volcanic winter could prevent civilization from producing enough food to feed its current population, making famine one of the most serious threats posed by an eruption. The United Nations estimated that global food stocks would last 74 days in 2012. When NASA scientists investigated the problem, they discovered that cooling a supervolcano was the most logical solution. A Yellowstone volcano is essentially a massive heat generator that can power 6 industrial power plants. Yellowstone currently releases 60 to 70% of the heat rising from below into the atmosphere via fissures in the magma chamber. The remaining magma settles, allowing it to dissolve additional volatile gases and minerals. When temperatures reach a certain threshold, an explosive eruption is unavoidable. If more heat could be extracted from the supervolcano, it would never explode. According to NASA, increasing heat transport from Yellowstone's magma chamber by 35% would render the park safe. The only remaining question is how. One possibility is to simply add more water to the supervolcano. Persuading legislators to support such an endeavor, on the other hand, would almost certainly be impossible. NASA, on the other hand, has devised an entirely new strategy. They believe that digging up to 10 kilometers inside the supervolcano and pumping high-pressure water down would be the most viable option. The circulating water would return at about 350 degrees Celsius, 662 degrees Fahrenheit, gradually draining heat from the volcano day by day. While such a project would cost approximately $3.46 billion, £2.69 billion, there is an enticing catch that may persuade lawmakers to commit. Wilcox estimates that Yellowstone currently emits approximately 6 GW of heat. Through drilling in this way, it could be used to create a geothermal plant, which generates electric power at extremely competitive prices of around 10 cents a kilowatt hour. You would have to give the geothermal companies incentives to drill somewhat deeper and use hotter water than they usually would, but you would pay back your initial investment and get electricity which can power the surrounding area for a period of potentially tens of thousands of years. And the long-term benefit is that you prevent a future supervolcano eruption which would devastate humanity. Speaking of eruptions and other disturbances, if you plan to visit Yellowstone to take in the splendor of Old Faithful before it dries up, remember to prepare for earthquakes. In fact, lots of them. This is because Yellowstone National Park experiences multiple earthquakes on a daily basis. This shouldn't come as much of a surprise given that the Yellowstone region is known for its high seismic activity. However, how frequently do earthquakes take place in the park? Yellowstone has between 1,500 and 2,000 earthquakes per year on average over the long term. To better understand this average, let's look at data from the last decade, from 2010 to 2019. During these 3,652 days, the USS seismograph stations at the University of Utah located 17,243 earthquakes in the Yellowstone region. This results in an average daily number of earthquakes of 4.7, or 1 every 5.1 hours. However, because roughly half of these events occur in swarms, they are not distributed evenly over time. In comparison, the USS recorded 14,080 earthquakes in the Utah region over the last decade, for an average of 3.9 earthquakes per day, or 1 every 6.2 hours. However, scientists are not even locating every earthquake that occurs in Yellowstone, or anywhere else for that matter. The seismic network's ability to record and locate an earthquake is directly related to the number of distribution of seismometers in the region. When an earthquake occurs, seismic energy spreads in all directions, but the energy diminishes as it travels away from the source. To determine the location and time of origin of an earthquake, at least 4 stations must record it. As a result, if you don't have a dense seismic array, it's difficult to record and locate very small earthquakes because you can't adequately record small earthquakes on enough stations. The energy from such minor quakes dissipates far too quickly to be recorded by the seismic network. The largest earthquake in recent years was a magnitude 4.8 in March 2014 near Norris Geyser Basin, which was felt widely throughout the area. Now, something has been going on with the Old Faithful, and things don't look good for this landmark. The Old Faithful, one of Yellowstone's most popular attractions, is not so faithful and it may shut down entirely. Old Faithful is slowing down, Rick Hutchison, who has studied the park's main visitor feature since 1970, bemoaned. He added, "One day, it might just permanently quit." In 1970, when I got here, the average interval was 66 minutes, Mr. Hutchison said in the 90s. Today, it is 77 minutes. In the 1970s, it was more regular. Our forecasts had a margin of plus or minus 5 minutes. Now it's plus or minus 10 minutes. The interval has now grown dramatically. The geyser's reputation for consistency dates back at least 150 years, when it was named Old Faithful by members of an expedition led by Montana Surveyor General Henry Washburn and Montana politician and businessman Nathaniel Langford. It has been called the Guardian of the Valley, wrote geologist Ferdinand Hayden, who conducted a subsequent scientific expedition in 1871. It is so regular in its operations and they occur so frequently that it has afforded unusual facilities for observation. Many visitors to Old Faithful may be unaware of the precise mix of heat and water required to keep the geyser ejecting a fountain of hot water and steam from its sophisticated subsurface plumbing on a regular basis. So what exactly is the issue with Old Faithful? The geyser had previously gone dormant hundreds of years ago, most likely due to the water half of the equation being out of whack. The geysers ceased to erupt near the conclusion of the so-called medieval climate anomaly, during which many regions throughout the world experienced extended periods of warm, dry weather. It's the time when we have things like grapes growing in northern England and a loss of sea ice that allowed people to discover Greenland, said Kathy Whitlock, a paleoclimatologist at Montana State University in Bozeman. We know in Yellowstone it was both warmer and drier. The upper tree line was higher up the slopes and there is evidence of more fires during that period. She also mentioned that catastrophic droughts in the region lasted for decades. Researchers have also discovered that earthquake-caused ground changes can influence geyser eruption intervals. This is most likely one of the reasons Old Faithful currently erupts every 94 minutes as opposed to every 60 to 65 minutes in the 1950s. However, because there was no indication of major earthquake activity during Old Faithful's dormant phase, geologists decided that the gap was most likely caused by the dry climate. Droughts have returned to the Yellowstone region, this time most likely triggered by human-induced global warming. A group of scientists published a report in 2008 demonstrating that years with lesser precipitation towards the end of the 20th century and beginning of the 21st century likely added a minute or two to Old Faithful's eruption cycle. If the weather continues to be dry, the geyser may shut down totally. Did we mention Yellowstone erupting again? While it is disturbing, the revelation becomes even more terrifying when you go below ground in Yellowstone National Park. A massive magma reservoir lying beneath your feet contains heated sponge-like rock and some molten rock that dwarfs a previously known magma chamber. The research found that the chamber contains enough scorching hot magma to fill the Grand Canyon 11 times over. The cavern was discovered by scientists while exploring the subsurface plumbing system beneath the supervolcano. Xin-Hua Huang, research author and seismologist at the University of Utah, stated that scientists have observed the continuous volcanic plumbing system beneath Yellowstone for the first time. This contains the previously discovered upper crustal magma chamber as well as the previously unseen lower crustal magma reservoir that connects the upper chamber to the Yellowstone hotspot plume below. The discovery is described by geophysicist Peter Cervelli as the missing link between the plume and the magma chamber. If an eruption occurred, the vast magma chamber would amplify the explosion, causing more destruction and reaching further afield on the planet. However, scientists believe that the question is not whether another supervolcano will erupt, but when. There is no way to prepare for the eruption of a supervolcano. They're just so huge that no known technology can contain them. Leave your thoughts and opinions on whether or not you would like to visit Yellowstone National Park down below.